So I want to say thank you so much. Let me start by expressing my profound appreciation to Scott Swivert for this opportunity of giving Nigeria, just spotlighting Nigeria with one of the most powerful techniques that I've seen in recent times. I've been in the University of Meetup, and I don't think I'm graduating soon. Meetup have connected me with quite a lot of people. So for me, I want to say profound appreciation for Nigeria hosting the very first coffee ever. And I hope that it opens our eyes to the opportunity that Lean Coffee presents. My name is Mercy George-Igbafe, the founder of Learntor. I'm located here in West Africa, in case you're wondering where Nigeria is. So I'm going to get Scott to speak and introduce Jim. After you do that, before Jim starts, I'll still play that video because it's organic, it's authentic, so I'll still play it. Thank you so much. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Mercy, and good to see everyone again. And I see quite a few faces in the audience here today that I know well and I've met in different things. One of the things that I've always found is when you come into Agile, it's very, very simple, but very, very big. Okay, very simple, very big. I'll let you know how big it is. We've had 800 events in this festival, every single one different, right? I've started watching the videos of ones because even if you've done 20 events, you can only do 3% of the festival. And even with 800 events, I think we've just scratched the surface. So 800 events, but at the same time, it can come down to the manifesto, which is quite simple, and that's the power of what we've got. And you know, within that, one of the techniques I think that's you know, great for inquiring as a group as to what to think about next in that huge sea of Agile is Lean Coffee. So I might come to you and I might want to tell you about things, but as a group, that might not be the things you want to know. And you know, it might not be the things you want to know yesterday, and it might not want to be the things that you know tomorrow. When I first came into the Agile community, we had meetups at a pub, and there were probably about 4 of us, and we used Lean Coffee. But I love Lean Coffee. And then later on, you know, when I met Jim, you know, it was great to meet you know, someone who'd been, you know, involved in that movement. One of the biggest issues you have in Africa is governance. Yeah, you have the patriarchy, you've got governance, you've got not all voices are equal, you've got you know, lots of systemic issues like you know, who gets jobs is depending on who you know and not your ability. The one thing I love about Lean Coffee is it gives you true democracy. So this isn't about what Mercy wants to talk about. This isn't about what Jim wants to talk about. It's about what the group wants to talk about. If you don't take anything else from the festival, take Lean Coffee, use it in your workplaces, use it in your lives. I use it with my kids because apparently they tell me to shut up. I know, okay? When Mercy wanted to do something, I said, do a Lean Coffee. Don't do the sage on the sage on the stage. Yeah. So don't do the sage on the stage thing. Use Lean Coffee. And then, you know, Mercy said, I've never done that before. And I said, well, I know a man who has. And that man is Jim. So I've known Jim for many years. I love Jim's work. I love Jim's books. We just, you know, it's one of those things that I'm not even sure how I met Jim, but we just started getting on. And at times when I needed like a little bit of mentoring or a little bit of help, he was always there. And when we asked if he could come and do this, he was always there. So you know, here's Jim. He's always there.
I'm always on.
You're always on. Thank you so much, Jim. Can I just quickly, anyway, he has just spoken. Maybe at some point in the show, I'll play the recording Scott sent to me earlier. Over to you, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. So as Scott mentioned, Lean Coffee is ostensibly a meeting format. We created it because one of my colleagues and I were having coffee, and he said, you know, there's a lot of people here in Seattle who are using personal Kanban. They're doing your stuff. We should start, you know, kind of a professional society around this. And I was like, that sounds like a lot of work. You have to do all the stuff that Mercy had to do to put this on. You know, you had to do all the logistics, you had to invite people, you have to, if you're live, you have to buy pizza or bring food. I said, why don't we just meet in a coffee shop and just talk about lean? And he said, well, so then we'll have a meetup. And what Scott was noting about the meetups that he was going to was that at a meetup, you go and you just talk. Maybe it's kind of like a meetup. You go and everybody has a bunch of different conversations. They don't have a direction. And so he said, well, we want it to have a little bit more structure than that. So we said, why don't we put a simple Kanban down on the table, and then people will write down anything they want to talk about, and then we'll vote, and then we'll just talk about what they want to talk about, and then we'll, you know, keep track of what we said. And it just sounded so simple as to kind of be, I don't know, stupid. But we did it anyway. And the first one we had 36 people show up. And so we had 3 different tables, and it went really well. And the next thing we knew, there were thousands of them worldwide happening every week. Companies using them, as Scott said, for their work. And this embodies something about Agile that, for me, or Lean, that is beyond either Agile or Lean, and it's humane management. It's treating each other with respect at all times. It's understanding how to communicate. And so I'm going to share my screen here really quick. Right now well, actually, I can share that screen back there because it's on the whole screen. This is actually my background on the screen back here. These communications, relationships, respect, flow, and PDSA, or continuous improvement, are the lenses that we use when we work with any team. So whenever we're working with a team from my company, we don't teach them Agile or Lean or personal Kanban or Lean Coffee. We go in and we say, what's your problem? How do you really need to interact with each other? And then we start to develop systems, usually visual, that say, are you getting the information that you need? Are you forming relationships with every piece of work that you do? So if someone comes and they say, hey, I've got this task for you, this task is never just me. It's always for somebody else, right? It's always with somebody else. We work in companies with other people. So we don't ever have our task. We have our part of the processing that we're doing as part of a larger group. And that is all about relationships. When you're able to build those two things, you have the information you need and you know what you're supposed to do, it's really easy to respect other people because you're not afraid. You're not worried. When you have these 3 things, flow of work is easier to achieve. You know, work comes in, you finish it well, and it's gone. Not a lot of rework, not a lot of bugs, not a lot of frustration. But also psychological flow is easier to achieve because you're not worried, what are those other people doing and what haven't they told me? You build both psychological and workflow, and then that makes continuous improvement a lot easier. So what always happens in Agile and in Lean is you get the coach, and the coach comes up and says, hey, do this massive behavioral change. And then they leave. And people are like, well, I'm going to go back and do what I was doing before. And then the coach comes back. It's like, why didn't you listen to me? And I said, well, you didn't listen to me because you didn't set up a system to actually help me do this. You know, 2-week iterations or you know, holding a stand-up meeting, that's not a system. Those are things to do. So have you set up a system that actually gets people the information they need so that they can get their work done and then allows them to be the best professionals they can? That creates that system that allows us to do continuous improvement. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. And now I'm going to give her, oh, actually, I'm going to share a different screen because she said I had 30 minutes. So really quickly, I'm going to put that in action. As Jocko and Scott both know, I hate slides. I don't care what I'm signed in as. Oh, damn it. But they do. All right. Hold on. Thank you for that value add, Google. All right. So the last couple of years, we've worked very hard in construction. It's not in software development, but in the actual building of buildings. And we've worked a lot with a company called Turner Construction. They're one of the largest construction companies on earth. And when we ran an exercise with them called a right environment exercise, this is one of the things they said they wanted to do. They wanted to have transparency, but they wanted to have transparency without stressing everybody out. So how could we do our work better in a way that didn't freak everyone out? So if you go in to any company right now and say, we're going to go through a huge agile transformation, they're pretty much instantly going to shut down. They're going to be like, I got enough to do. I got kids. I've got work. I've got everything else. I can't deal with that much more change. So how can we deliver change to them in a way that doesn't freak everyone out? So these are pictures here of the Coney Island Hospital. So this is a hospital in Brooklyn, New York. This is right after Superstorm Sandy basically destroyed the hospital. So this is leading down to their equipment room. You can see there's full of water here. There's a waterfall on the other side. And we all know a waterfall is bad. But down there was all of their servers, all of their electrical equipment, everything. So they had a hospital full of people and nothing, no potable water, no anything. This was their emergency room, admitting room. So a couple of government agencies got together and said, we're going to fund a new hospital. And so that's the project that we were working on. This is a hospital that could withstand a 1,000-year storm in New York. And so we got together and we did that original right environment exercise, and we started building those visual systems. So even just in this one picture, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different visual systems to manage this project that hadn't even started yet. Okay. And what we wanted to do there is we wanted to build an environment that had good communications so that people could build good relationships and respect and flow and the other things I just talked about. So everywhere on this floor of this building, there were different, what they called storyboards. And so here's a storyboard back here for the constraints they were dealing with. Here's one for the things that they were buying and who had responsibilities for buying those things. Here's how they were going to make a safe system to build the project. At that point, we were doing a study and we realized that actually hand and foot injuries were the most common on site. So we were coming up with all sorts of ideas about how to mitigate those when we finally got into the trailer. So this is the trailer. You can see still there's a bunch of everyone in the trailer, not surprisingly, has a personal Kanban. But whether it's Nicole's Kanban or back here is Elvis's Kanban, then next to Elvis's desk, Elvis is the chief superintendent. He's got another visual control so everyone knows who's going to be on site at what time. You can't see it here, but over here, IO has a set of different visual controls for 4 different relationships that they were dealing with at the time. But now what happens is if IO needs to ask Nicole something, he can look over at her board and see what she's doing. And he, like right now, she's not doing anything except eating lunch, but he knows when he should and should not bother her. And especially during COVID, when we're not at work and we can't really see each other, everything is an interruption. We're just being interrupted all the time. So now they know when they can and can't interrupt each other. So I'm trying to just go through this as quickly as possible. For building relationships, the construction industry is famous for having really bad relationships. Just really, really, really confrontational relationships. And so what Turner does is they go through a thing called pull planning, which says that before every week, they get together with all the trades that are going to be on site in the upcoming 3 weeks, and they figure out dependencies for what needs to happen before that, what needs to happen before that. This task here has an activity, it has a duration, and it has triggers. What are the things that will make this possible of being done? And this is a tradesperson here. The trades before never had any idea who was going to be on site and when. So they would show up for work and there would be people in their space. And then they couldn't work. And then they'd get mad. And then they would yell at the other tradespeople. And then they'd get in a fight. So that's not good. And what's funny is I know that anyone who has worked with any type of change, when Turner first said we want to do this, all the tradespeople were like, no, that's a waste of my time. I don't want to do that. And it's amazing to watch them get in. They start to work. And then within an hour or so, they'll have a confrontation. You know, there'll be some conflict between like this ticket and this ticket. And then they're like, oh, hey, we're having that fight here in 5 minutes with just us, as opposed to having 40 people on site with gear having that fight. They're like, this is awesome. So, so we build those relationships, which then again starts to build respect. There's a way that people think that I tell people to do Kanban. There is no right way to do Kanban, and theirs does something that any normal Kanban coach will tell you can't do, but it divides their work up by day. And then if something doesn't get done on a day, it gets pushed to the next day, but they watch that work walk across the week. They have large meetings that are going to take people out. So if this is one of like Nicole's big meetings and Sebastian needs to talk to Nicole on Tuesday, Sebastian knows way ahead of time that's not going to happen. Right. And the reason is that this work gets real fast. This is the course of 2 visits. This is the beginning of week 1, the end of week 1, the beginning of the next week, the end of the next week. This stuff happens really fast and it's really dangerous. These things are heavy. They can kill you. So we have to know that Turner as a company is responsible for all the logistics of building this. So even during COVID, in 1 year, this is the 10th floor. You know, they're flying, right? So they have to build a safe system. So even more visual controls outside for something that's called a pre-task plan, right? So every day when someone comes on site, they have to say who they are, what they're going to do, what hazards they're going to run into, and how they're going to mitigate those risks. Imagine if we did that instead of having stand-up meetings. Imagine if we stood up every day and we didn't say, yesterday I did this, and today I'm going to do that, and tomorrow I'm going to, you know, quit and open a coffee shop. Imagine if we came in the morning and said, this is what we're working on today. These are the risks that we're running into, and these are how we're going to mitigate those risks. Imagine how much technical debt that would alleviate. These are real conversations, not just between the single company, but between the companies that are out there. So there's 6 companies on site on this particular day. And every morning they meet in front of these boards, although now these boards are inside where it's warm. So then we achieve flow. In Agile, we've tried very, 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 very hard to not plan our work. And now we're doing it to our detriment. We've eaten a lot of, don't do architecture, don't do rigid plans, don't do this, don't do that, to the point that now we don't plan at all. We just come up with very vague user stories and hope everything turns out okay. While we're building software, it's never done until it's released. And even when it's released, it's not done. That's why we have patches. You can't patch a hospital. It's got to be done. And we need to take that professional lesson into our work in knowledge work and software. We can't tolerate technical debt anymore. So what we learned at Turner was that, yes, it's important to go out and make sure that they're installing things right. But before that, it needs to be designed right. And it's designed through things called submittals. So submittals include any change order, any alteration to the design that happens during construction, which happens literally tens of thousands of times for a project like this. They will process tens of thousands of submittals. So this is very early in the project. This is in January of last year. You can see that already they've had over 1,000 submittals. And this is when they just broken ground, right? So we had to work out a collaborative system to process that. So we had to get the architects together, the engineers together, and Turner, and say, how does this flow? How do these flow collaboratively? Not how do you do some work, then the next person do some work, then the next person do some work. So I'll go back to what I said before. We don't ever work alone. We always work together. And then this is the saying for the trailer, is that if they get those good designs, then they can actually build it right, and then everybody goes home safe. And that's pretty much the end of it. Is when you set all that stuff up, then you actually have the systems in place to do continuous improvement. So that's my really, really quick thingy. That project was so awesome to work on. And now I'm going to actually do the lean coffee, which is what we are all waiting for. So chat.
Yes.
There we go. All right. So this will take you into the lean coffee board. Just click on that link in the chat. There, got one person in. There we are. People. It is very orange in here.
Why? Is it hot?
That's right.
Sorry.
Hot coffee. Hopefully the color of your coffee is not orange. Okay, so I think we're getting almost everyone. So when we get in, as soon as we get in, you'll see that there's an add topics bubble. Anything you want to talk about, anything in the entire world that you want to talk about, type that into the topics bubble. You can put up many different topics, just one topic per thing. And do that right now. Anything you want to talk about Agile, about Lean, about anything. And what we're doing here is we're creating a democratically generated agenda. We are getting away from agenda-driven meetings and into more agile meetings.
Mercy, you have to type it in the chat. You click the link and enter your details. You can put the topic in there and you'll be voted on, not on Zoom. Thank you.
So my virus checker just told me that it was going to reboot my computer kind of without my will, against my will. So I might disappear. It was like, I'm gonna install this now and then I'm going to reboot. And there was no like, no, for the love of God, don't do that. But so when you all are developing software, don't do that.
Oh, they're rebooting to install that button to tell them not to reboot. So.
Well, hopefully it won't really happen. But all right, so here we are. Okay, and some people have already voted.
Can I ask a question while we get the stragglers in quickly?
You bet.
Is the Lean Coffee Table, is that available for free online, or what's the current licensing? I haven't looked at it for a while.
I believe it has a free version, and then if you wanted to do crazy things, yeah, I know it has a free version because I used it for free for a while, and yeah, it is a British product, and I don't know, I'm quite happy with it. So just to let you know, I'm like really not happy with any online Kanban tools. I think I hate absolutely every single one of them, but I love this one. This is gonna sound really egomaniacal, but it was really cool to see someone take one of our ideas and like really do a good job with it. All right, so I think we got enough stuff up there. So now if you want to vote, everyone has 3 votes. You can vote for 3 different things or 2 different things. You can spread your votes around any way you want, but start clicking those vote buttons and let's see what we really want to talk about. And if someone wants some explanation of any of the topics, just ask. And if it's your topic, give a little explanation for what you mean.
And by the way, I really love the feature of the Lean Coffee tool. When I attended another Lean Coffee, it was really good.
Yeah, these guys built this many years ago, and it was kind of ignored by the whole world. And then COVID hit, and then now they're overwhelmed with the amount of attention. So okay, so if you haven't voted yet, please do vote. There's 3 or 4 people in there that haven't voted at all. We want to make sure that everyone's votes are counted. All right. Okay. All right. I'm gonna close off voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So now we have an agenda, and we have an agenda that was created by all of us. And the reason that that's important is that everyone here is smart. Everyone here is a professional. Everyone here has value. Everyone here has their own perspective. And if I come and we have a meeting and I just give you my agenda, then I'm forcing my perspective onto you. It's a push system where I'm pushing the value. This is a pull system where you are pulling the value. It also means that we get to discover crazy things that we never thought of before. So I'll go ahead and put this up here for 10 minutes. And so whoever put this ticket in, would you like to introduce it?
Okay, my name is Uchena. The question is try to understand how Kanban and Scrum, whether it could coexist, the advantages and disadvantages of each, environment where we could use this, and environment where we could use the other one.
Gosh, 9 minutes and 17 seconds. Here we go. So the first thing that I would say is Kanban versus Scrum is kind of like steak versus apple. There's no reason for there to be a versus. It can be Kanban and Scrum, or neither Kanban nor Scrum, or Scrum, blah, blah, blah. So in fact, one of the first books that we published was a book called Scrumban, which was a book entirely about Corey Lattice's journey from an agile mindset to a lean mindset, and still incorporating elements of both. So what I would say is that both Kanban and Scrum are terrible and that you shouldn't do them. But what you should do is say, all right, I've got a team, and that team has to produce a thing, and it's made up of these people who are interacting with these customers. And all of those interactions dictate the conversations that you should have. And I have a quick story to illustrate why I feel that way. When I first started my software company, we had a really amazing project, a really fun project. We were building the first real-time traffic website with a mapping interface. So basically, when you go to Google now and you want to look at the traffic for cities, that's the stuff that we invented in this project. And we were doing that for the San Francisco Bay Area government. And we were using XP at the time, which is kind of like Scrum without all the added flavors. And we had 2-week iterations. And at the end of each 2-week iteration, we did a demo for the client. So the client was seeing the product in development every 2 weeks. And we were happy. We were like really happy about how things were going. So we had first sprint, second sprint, third sprint, and then all of a sudden, like in the middle of a sprint, we got this very angry email from the customer, and they're like, "We need to talk to you right away." So we get all the developers together in our conference room. We turn on this is, a while ago, so we turn on the speakerphone, and we have this call with them, and they start yelling at us about how they don't have this, and they don't have this, and they don't have this. And all of those things were the things that we were working on in that sprint. And we told them, after they finished yelling, those are the things that are doing in this sprint. They're going to be there next Friday. And then they grumbled, and then they went away. And of course, we went back to our desks and we're like, these stupid clients, they don't get it. They don't get Agile. They don't get blah, 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 blah. But what really was happening was that those clients were human beings. They were people. And the project, when we took it over, was already 1.5 years late. Okay. So we took a project that had been in peril its entire project over, and we expected that just because we had delivered well, that the customer had all the information that they needed. So that relationship issue wasn't going to be solved by XP or Scrum or Agile. It wasn't going to be solved by Kanban or Lean. It was going to be solved by us understanding what their needs were and making sure that they got them. And that meant that we were doing internal 2-week iterations, but we started to do 3-day releases. And then every 3 days or so, I would call them up and say, hey, I've got something new for you to look at. So we cut the delivery cycle down even more because the level of the stress of our client was so high. I've worked with other teams where they've changed their delivery cycle, their visualization methods, because they have new people on the team, or because they're a team made up of veterans who really understand things. So there's a certain type of information that needs to be provided. So the Agile versus Lean, or the Scrum versus Kanban, those are the fights that other people who are selling you those things want you to have. So just to be blunt, Kanban University and Scrum Inc. want you to fight about Scrum versus Kanban, because every time you do, it means that you have to go get accreditations and certifications from them. But what you need to do is say, what is it in Scrum that works? What is it in Kanban that works? What is it in XP that works? What is it in behavioral economics that works? What is it in all these different things that we can pull from that will make us all super happy at the end of the day, where we feel professional satisfaction for the work we did. We know we've helped somebody over the course of the day, and we feel, or no, we don't feel, we know that we were respected and that we respected others. Now I'll back up and I will say a couple of things. The Scrum methodology is a batch and queue methodology. You come up with a bunch of things to do, you do those bunch of things, you come up with another bunch of things to do, and you do those bunch of things. So it is mini waterfall. The Kanban methodology is breaking things up and allowing things to come as they will. There's a happy medium in between there. There's a happy medium of, actually original planning was plan all the stuff up front and then hope for the best. If we recognize that everything has evolutionary development, we have to, there is no option, we have to visualize our work. And we have to limit our work in progress so that we can focus on what we're doing and finishing it. We have to plan up front some sort of roadmap so that we know when we've actually learned something. So this is our plan. It doesn't mean we have to stick to it, but as we move through that roadmap and then we learn something here and then we go off in this direction, we know why. And we have a mechanism for when we learn something for someone to raise their hand and say, hey, as a professional, I noticed that this is going to happen. This is a risk, just like on the construction site. This is a risk that we're about to hit. Here's how we can mitigate it. And then when you do that, you have an internal system so no one feels like they're upsetting everybody. But then you also build external systems so that you can say to your customer, hey, we discovered this and now we're going to do this other thing. So our the very first Kanban project ever, we had a client where the client had asked us to do a bunch of work for them that had never been done before. We were using alpha builds of Microsoft stuff, of ArcGIS, of just all of our tools at that time were alphas, and the product we were building itself was going to change in industry. This is a different project. So what we did with that project was we told the customer, you need to come to every one of our stand-up meetings and you need to make every decision with us. Don't give us a budget, but do give us a monthly burn rate. If we exceed 70% of that burn rate, we will stop work and we'll have a conversation about it. We never exceeded 60% of their burn rate. We beat all of their expectations. And the reason was because we managed their expectations by constantly having those conversations and letting them see every bit of complexity that we found as we found it. And I'll just say this one thing. This was in 2005. We were doing 10-minute releases of our software, and it was enterprise scale software. It wasn't web. We were doing real-time release of enterprise scale software in 2005. So this stuff can be done. You just have to build the system, not take it out of a book. Even if I wrote it, I write great books, but use those things to build. Okay, so now everyone's heard the ding. If you look back at the Lean Coffee board, you will see that there's a thing there to vote to extend the topic, to I don't care, or to end the topic. So what we have here is we have also the ability of the room to say, stop talking about that, which is something in most meetings that we don't have. So if everyone wants to toss in a quick vote for that. And, oh, it's looking so close. I'm going to go ahead and extend this for, stop being perfectly divided. All right, so I'm going to extend this for 3 minutes, and if someone else has a follow-on question to that, please ask.
There's a chat by Joe.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on Jira as a visualization tool, or as an organizational system, particularly in the age of COVID, since many of us no longer have the choice to do the big walls? Any thoughts on that?
What I appreciate about this is that you're simultaneously goading me and allowing me to not be goaded. There are very few tools in this world that I dislike more than Jira. Having said that, these tools have become a necessity. So then the question is now, how can you make these tools that are extremely ill-fitting for all types of work fit when we need to actually have a conversation? So in the visualization realm for Jira in particular, there's classic Jira and new Jira. And I don't know why they did this, but I've seen it many times. There were a lot of really great features in the old version of Jira that they've killed off. So now it's very difficult to build a visualization of your work that's anything more than a dumb Scrum board. And the things that I would want to see in a tool like that are to have different swim lanes, which means like you have one type of work that a team is doing here that has a certain number of steps, and then another type of work that the team's doing in another lane with different steps, but you can see at any given point in time in one place where all the things are that the team is doing. Jira used to do that. They decided that I guess people weren't ready for that kind of power and they took it away. At the moment, we're using Jira, Asana, Trello, Kanban tool, and Kanban flow for different clients. And then an internal tasks is the thing that they use internally at Facebook. So we're using that as well. And the people who originally built tasks actually went off to build Asana. The goal here, again, is just to make sure that we're communicating. So it's tougher now to communicate because we're not standing with the people that we're working with. So everything feels like an interruption. So ordinarily during the day, what happens on my screen back here is on this side of the screen, I have a timer that lets me work for 25 minutes and then get up and walk around so that I don't weigh 300 pounds. And then over here, I have my team's Kanban board. And it's embarrassingly enough in Trello. This is kind of like my operations monitor back here. It's really important to keep those conversations going. The tool that you use right now, whether it's Jira or whatever it is, doesn't matter quite as much because none of them are going to work quite right. What's important is that we remain diligent, that we are always asking ourselves, how is that board lying to me? What isn't that board telling me? So we'll finish that topic and we'll move into adaptability of Agile to projects other than software development.
Right. Hello, Jim. My name is Emmanuel
Hey.
Umoke. Thanks for your time on this. I really have enjoyed the session so far. My question comes from some of the things you spoke about when you were talking about your time at Turner and how you worked on that hospital project. One of the things that I've noticed is Agile, obviously, having come from software development, is better suited to that environment. However, there were unique things that you people did using Agile for it to work. And you did mention about the done tasks that had to be done in construction as against, what you will find with patch updates and all that in the software environment. So could you please speak more about that? Because that's very key for me, especially if I don't work on a software related project. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, well, there's a lot of directions to go in that with that. So the first thing I'd say with that is that the major problem with software development at all, and almost all of the things that have been developed in Agile, are that the rate of defects in software are higher than will be tolerated by any other industry. I mean, imagine, you get your COVID shot and then a couple weeks later they call you up and say, oh, you know what? That actually makes your leg fall off. Here's a second shot to make your leg not fall off. So other industries don't have the level of failure demand that software development does. Now, for a long time, we've been able to coast as an industry because we've been building things like Candy Crush. And if Candy Crush breaks and someone can't crush some candy, they might be upset for a few minutes. But if your 737 MAX breaks and the plane crashes into the ground and kills 300 people, that's a different thing. And in software, we're doing that all the time now. We don't have the depth of professionalism that we need to provide safe products for our users. And so in construction or in banking or in world governance I would say that over the course of modus cooperandi, about 30% of our work has been in software development. And the other 70% has been literally in everything else, from making shoes in South Africa to we've been blessed with a lot of really cool experiences. So my background before software was I was an urban planner and a civil engineer. So in that, if I built a subway, I don't get Subway 2.0. You have to design it right the first time. So what their problems are the opposite of our problems. So the problems in software have been just like how do we know what we're doing at all? Their problems have always been like, how do we stop over designing everything? And which actually, funny enough, was the original problem that Agile was trying to solve. So when we go into an environment like that, I don't go in as an Agile person or as a lean person. I go in as a systems thinker. And I say, tell me, we'll go through and we'll do something that's called a value stream mapping exercise. And in that exercise, people will list all of the steps that they take to get some complex thing done. Underneath that, we say, okay, where are the parts where this breaks or frustrates you or causes confusion? So not where the big explosions, but where are the little annoyances that stop value from flowing or make it not flow well, or just send you home in a bad mood. And then around those, we start to put other stickies that say, how might we fix these? So then we can see the system, we can see the shortcomings of that system, whatever that system is, and then ways that we can fix it. Already, that is a lean, agile thing. We've visualized the work that's being done. We've created a visual conversation. And I've worked with teams who have worked together literally for decades. There was one software team that Tony Ann and I worked with that had been together for 25 years in Ontario. And they fought bitterly about how their work flowed for like a whole week. They could not agree how they did their work. And the reason was because after 25 years, what happened was all the people on the team just did whatever they felt like. And somehow it all, worked out in the end. When we work with other groups, we take, we'll say the ethics of Agile and Lean first. Respect for people, experimentation, small batches, frequent communication, and a lot of the other stuff we get rid of. So it would be very silly to tell them to work in 2-week sprints. So I've seen this several times where like people will go into a marketing company and they'll say, we want you to have enterprise agile. So now marketing is going to work in 2-week sprints. And the marketing people are like, thanks. I'll go do that. And then of course they don't. Or let's say, for example, where something is extremely immediate demand, like a nursing station in a hospital, where a nursing station in a hospital has things that they have to do every day. They have things they have to do every hour, and they have things they have to do every minute while being constantly interrupted. They have things that are in flight, like blood work from the person in this room needs to go get these tests done. We need to get the information back. These 3 different specialists need to find it out. When we find these things out, the nurse practitioner can do these things and the specialists need to make these decisions. They have to do the logistics for all those things. It's a very highly active, stressful environment. So they will use a wide array of tools. And when we work with them, some of them are agile tools. So they do rounds every day, which is basically like a stand-up meeting. But we'll rework that stand-up meeting to include a little bit more retrospective every day, because things honestly do change that fast on the floor. But it's one of the challenges with the world is like we have the word agile and we have the word Scrum, and we think they mean the same thing, but they're really different things entirely. And it's been my role in the Agile community, and I think Jocko probably knows this better than anyone. My role in the Agile community has always been to point at parts where we're getting dogmatic and to say, that's not what this was about. Agile isn't about doing things in 2-week chunks. Agile is about making sure you're doing the right thing at the right time, and that the people who are getting it are happy with it and they understand what you did. And that is a universal message that can be put in a coffee shop, or it can be, at the UN Food and Agriculture Office, or it can be, at Facebook.
Yeah, if I could comment?
Yeah.
One of the things I see a lot in Kanban that drives me nuts, because it's totally against kind of the whole idea of it, is it's very static. They'll plop it in and it becomes a static, and then it's like yelling at people for not following the rules. And when I tell people that oftentimes, most times, don't even put whip limits on columns, all suddenly the Kanban police come out and start yelling at me. Yes, I want to limit system whip, but I may or may not want to do it on the columns. The whole idea that I'm getting at here is it's flexible to suit the context that you're operating in, and you want to constantly jigger it because your environment's constantly changing. Yeah.
Yeah, the moment that it's not flexible, then it becomes inflexible. And,
so wise. That's very wise. Yes.
So the while people are voting, I'll just we had a project that we were working on in the States, and the team set up their board, and it had all these columns, and it looked really nice. And then I left for a month, and I came back, and the board was beautiful. They had nice cards. The cards had great information in them. Everything was flowing. But in the middle of it, there were 2 columns with no tickets in them. And there was tickets everywhere else. So it was like really, it was like a ramp. It was like you jumped over those 2 columns. And so I said, why is there nothing in those columns? And those were columns for testing. And so I thought they were going to tell me that the testers had their own board, which was going to make me mad. But what they did tell me was, they said, well, when you were here last time, you told us that when we tested at the end, that was a really bad idea and that we should involve our testers actually in development. So we did that. So the testing actually happens in real time while we're developing now and not at the end. So we don't use those columns. And I said, and they had the board set up on this big window with painter's tape, with the blue painter's tape. And I said, why didn't you take those columns down? And they said, it's too hard to move the tape. So yeah, once someone puts, this is like a big problem actually in Jira, is that once something gets into Jira, it's so hard to change it that you're stuck with those steps that someone created that may or may not fit how work is actually done. And if your Kanban is done right, you're changing it all the time. So there's another quick story is in auto manufacturing, there's a cord that is called an andon cord. And at Toyota, if someone pulls the andon cord, the line stops. So the car will stop moving on the line. Some people will run over and you will solve whatever problem needs to be solved. And then the car moves on. And GM, General Motors, found out about this and they're like, that's cool. So they, had the Toyota people come over and give them help and they install these cords. And then the Toyota people come back later and they say, how's it going? And they say, well, it's great. We used to pull the andon cord like 100 times a day. Now we're down to 5 or 6. And the Toyota people said, we pull our cords thousands of times a day. What's wrong with you? So the point is that when you build one of these systems, it's not to make it so that you don't pay attention to it anymore. It's to make it so that you pay attention to it even more. That they require care and feeding and nourishment, just like people. And that's what professionalism is. Agile for teenagers.
Well, strangely enough, I'll periodically insert cues just to change up the board. That's how much I'll change it. I want to experiment to see if something that I'm not seeing, maybe I can visualize it. And oftentimes I'll find that there's actually a cue there. So the point is that you're always changing your board a little bit just to change with the time, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, or to make sure you're not missing anything. All right. So who put in Agile for teenagers? Who here is a teenager?
Hello, good evening.
Hi there.
I did. And I'm not a teenager. I love to work with teenagers. I'm actually new to Agile, so I'm learning a lot. But one of the things I've learned is that Agile seems to be like a calmer or something that calms people or like so. And I see teenagers to be very effervescent, they are exuberant, they are juvenile. So how do we get them to be a lot more calmer, transparent, using the agile terms? So that's that's why I put it there. I'm just new to this, so I'm just thinking, how can I use it with teenagers? How can I work with teenagers on this? Yeah.
Awesome. So I have one answer and one person that I need to introduce you to. So right now, Tony Ann, my business partner, is working on a book called Kidsbon, which is all about using Kanban with kids. And we, at this point, we'll just treat Kanban as an agile tool. And the things that we have found, whether they're teenagers or little kids, is the clarity that the visualization brings creates calmness in all humans. Now, the only time it doesn't is when there's something that's coming up that really stresses you out. But it would have come up anyway, whether you were visualizing or not. So we've worked with like little kids, like little like even pre-lingual kids that can't speak yet. And so we'll put their moms will put up a Kanban that like says before you leave the house, and they'll have like pictures of socks and pictures of shoes and pictures of a bed, and say you need to make your bed, you need to put on your socks and shoes before you leave. And then as the kid works up, the kid gets chores or schoolwork in those boards. For teenagers, where teenagers have lots of distractions and they're basically running on, it's like distraction playhouse in their heads, especially with the internet. Having the reward of being able to move something into done.
Yeah.
And maybe a secondary reward of saying, when you get 5 or 6 of these things done, then you can, do something else that you want to do. Then that lets them start to build the relationship between completion of a task and reaching a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a woman named Cara in Cape Town, and I will make sure that I get you her email.
Thank you.
She runs a group called Codex.
Okay, Codex.
And they work with at-risk teenagers, and they teach them how to code. They teach them life skills and so forth, and that's all on an Agile / Kanban model.
Okay.
And she is one of my heroes. She is like completely awesome. So what kind of teenagers are you working with?
Basically, all teenagers, not any particular, just teenagers, yeah. Secondary school, high school students.
Okay.
I have a comment. I have a comment. That's okay.
It is.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is if you can give them the idea, particularly teenagers, but all kids, the sense of control that, hey, this is something that you can, I don't care what order it's done in, I don't care when it's done, blah, 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 but it's up to you, but here's what has to be done, that kind of thing, and gives them the sense of control over their own environment, because usually people are always telling them what to do and when to do it and yelling at them for not doing it. So that sense of control that the boards give them to be able to do the things in the order that they feel like doing them, as long as they're done, is key. So it's handing over that control.
Hi, Jim. I don't mind adding to this because this is something that is very close to my heart. I'm training a group of teenagers. I have actually got the letter to support that, but I intentionally have not put it on social media. They are children with disability. They're deaf and dumb. I actually had to care for one that is deaf and dumb, my husband's niece, and I took her on as a responsibility. So I had to learn sign languages to communicate with her. So in line with what Joker said, where I saw that I succeeded, and I think I stood out for most of the parents of the special needs, was my interest to relate with them. Number one, I had to learn sign languages. And now, because of the success with my daughter, because I see her as my daughter anyway, with her, raising her, communicating with her, giving her such autonomy to know that she can make decisions, and she's very smart. So I've seen, in line with what Joker said, working with these children, trying not to tell them what to do, but showing them how to do what to do to succeed is actually a winner. So I thought I had to that because that's very close to my heart, something I'm working on at the moment.
If I may add to that as well, I mean, and this is again in line with what Joko and the Mercy just mentioned now. I think some of these things, sort of in my opinion, sort of aligns with the principles of Montessori. Even though, I mean, from Montessori, tends to be used, I mean, for preschool kids. But I think in Australia, it's gone higher than that, whereby, I mean, kids, I mean, at teenage age, I mean, levels, they sort of, use Montessori. And without a shadow of doubt, it's worked, I mean, very well. So really and truly, if there is a way we can sort of, I mean, this is for Chinyere now, where, Agile and some of the basic principles of Montessori, that will definitely do something.
Thank you.
All right. So I did send you Kara's email there.
Yes, please. I've gotten it. Thank you very much.
Yep. Good. All right. That are we? This could be its own call for sure. The one thing that I'll add to that just in closing is that it's so my wife has retired, but she was a speech pathologist, and so she was always working with kids who had learning difficulties in one way or another, who like you were pointing out are really smart, and that it's easy to believe that they're not because they can't communicate in a way that we're expecting. And that goes back to the lenses that I brought out earlier. So the first act there is the act of communicating. Through that communicating, we build that relationship, which instantly creates that respect. Once that starts happening, it's a lot easier to work with the kids, which achieves the flow and then allows them to improve. It's one of the things that I love about the work that I've been allowed to do is that I get to have amazing conversations like that one. Because it's they're wonderful. All right, so actually right now I should ask, it's 9/11 and I turned off my calendar. So do we have 50 minutes or?
It's a 2 hours event, but it's
okay.
up to you. Yeah.
Okay, good deal. All right. Just wanted to make sure. I am famous for not noticing that we're done. Remote work and collaboration. Why would that be relevant now? So who put this one in?
That is my topic, of course, but my internet is choppy right now, so I don't know if I could give it. I think it's self-explanatory, isn't it?
It is. So do you just want me to shoot my mouth off, or did you want to say something?
I always enjoy that, yes. The hindrances of remote work make it more difficult, because a lot of stuff that we're doing is we want to visualize stuff. We want to get things on walls and stuff like that. As I was alluding to before with Jira, I wasn't so much interested in Jira itself. If you could use physical walls and things like that, you can supplement Jira, and Jira can be your canonical. Now that we can't use those walls, all we're stuck with is the canonical. So what are some ways that we can re-enable collaboration, which we used to do just by getting people in the room and looking at each other? Now that we can do that, what are some of the things that are available to us that aren't necessarily technological? Just now that we're a year into this, what have we learned?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I've noticed when doing major exercises with companies on like Miro and Zoom is that even though we're able to kind of replicate the wall and the things that go on the wall, what we're not able to do is replicate the fact that, you know, you can feel a piece of paper, that if we're working on something on the wall, I might be talking to some people, but 20 other people in the room may be having different conversations between each other. And so it becomes like a serial conversation and not parallel conversations. And those parallel conversations are parallel processing. The group is processing information together. And what I find in the Zoom environment is that the amount to which we're able to process together is diminished, because we can't have those side conversations. You know, even if that side conversation is like, you know, look at this, look, you know, just look at this thing. Even that is human beings interacting with other human beings. So we have had great collaborations and gotten a lot of really good work done worldwide. So one of my clients is in Germany, so I'm up at 5 a.m. all the time working with them. They're staying late, I'm up early, neither of us are at our best, and we're still getting good stuff done. But the other day this is like in the middle of a lean exercise, right? We're doing a value stream mapping exercise around a system that we want to create some OKRs for. And one of the people in the call, you can see that they're not right, that something's wrong. And then they mute, but they don't shut their camera off. And they mute, and then they're like, and the person was crying. And so I, you know, sent him a private message. I was like, "Are you okay? You know, what's going on?" And he's like, "This would be so amazing if we were together doing this." He was like that upset that we weren't together, that we weren't, and that we couldn't eat, and we couldn't have food, that we couldn't have those side conversations. So I've seen collaboration be extremely possible, but it's not optimal. And I'm looking forward to my shot. I'm looking forward to my shot. I mean, this would have been a very different event if I would have actually come to you on the plane and we would have all got together and had food and coffee and had this conversation. This creates a ask Jim questions dynamic and not a let's have a conversation dynamic.
Yeah, I think if the collaboration was already there, it's not too difficult to maintain it. But I started a new company literally a month into COVID, so I never have actually been in the office. And there's a large global bank. And they don't have a culture of collaboration. So I'm looking at how do you instill, not that you can answer this, but how does one instill collaboration working remotely in a culture that doesn't have it. And I'll go back to my original question, maybe, is what have we learned in the last year, if anything, in terms of our ability or inability to do that?
I mean, if I may say something here, I mean, contribution, I mean, to Joko's question now. I think, I mean, I had a similar experience, I mean, with yourself regarding, I mean, you started a new company, but I sort of started a new job with a global bank. That collaboration piece was missing because, these are people I never worked with. They don't know me. I mean, they don't know how I work, and I don't, similar stuff. I don't know how they work. And it was very difficult. The fact that, we were not in the same place, it made, that sort of, I work, I mean, on contract basis. I mean, a piece of work that I know that if it were to be pre-COVID, we would have, made a good of that piece of work. But the fact that, that collaboration was missing, really, the contract didn't really, get to, get to completion, whereby, I think after about 3 months, it was game over for everyone. Very painful, but that is, one thing that this lack of collaboration has, sort of brought in. On the other hand, I mean, where, because, in most situations, I think if we can sort of try to look at positives from it, I think we can learn something. I'm a Nigerian, by origin, and I live in the UK. One of the things that has always happened is that when there is a family event, a lot of people will have to fly home, cost a lot of money, cost a lot of, or sometimes, and when you can't, you have to miss those family events. And what I'm alluding to here is the burial ceremony of a father's friend. I mean, of a friend's dad, whereby, I mean, normally, if it were to be pre-COVID days, he wouldn't have been able to attend, his dad's burial. But because of, all of the collaboration tools like Zoom that everyone now uses freely and openly, he was able to, from here in London, sort of be part of his father's burial ceremony. And, it's not, and this is something that I'm sure will mean the world to everyone to be able to say a goodbye in one shape or form to their parent. So, I mean, really and truly, with this, COVID situation and the fact that, remote, everything is happening remotely now, he was able to do that. So I think for me, that is a degree of takeaway from our current situation, which is, remote working or remote lives and collaboration.
I'd like to add to that. Is our time still okay? Can I do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Go for it.
So for me, I started Learntor literally in the peak of COVID, right? The business was registered 2019, but my operation really took off in 2020. So I had to pivot fully into the agile space and focus on it. So I would say to a degree that my lessons learned has been a huge blessing. But I really do miss individual interaction in the sense that I lost a friend of mine, just things we take for granted, yeah? We are always in communication. Before COVID, you just think everybody's going to leave forever. His death really, really affected me in a very bad way because I should have seen him. We were childhood friends for a very long time, Ubon King, but I never got time to actually to see him, even within 5 years of knowing and getting to see what I've started doing with Learntor, and he was so proud of me. I was so devastated by his death, yet digital technology was great because we communicated, but that human connection, just the opportunity to sit down and talk to each other as friends, was totally taken away from me. And that is one of the pain that I have with this COVID. So I just can't imagine those that have lost loved ones, or the COVID patients in the hospital that could not say goodbye to their families. It must have been really hard. So for me, I don't know. I think it's just a pretty painful experience in total. As much as it's great, it has a lot of setbacks with it. Thank you.
Yeah, let's get the vote here, but the before all of this happened, I traveled three weeks out of 4 all year long. I was usually on every continent every year, and which meant I got to just constantly be meeting new people, eating good food, doing fun work. And then almost exactly 1 year ago, this is my chair. I've never sat in one place this long. But I also now I know my wife a lot better. Like a lot better. I own 3 grills, and I've been able to cook a lot of food, and there have been good things about it. But what I would like is that the trade-off be more that we've learned that we can that being with our families is a good thing, and I would like to have back our ability to see each other and be together, which I think is probably going to happen fairly soon. Hopefully people can put enough syringes onto airplanes. Okay, Scrum and project management. This one does need to be explained because I kind of see Scrum as a project management tool. So whose is this? Scrum in the project management environment. All right, who voted for it?
Probably left.
Well, so at least a few people voted for it. So how do we vote? Who voted for it?
So I didn't vote for it, but I would say that sometimes people think of traditional project management, very command and control with no flexibility, and I think Scrum is very different than that.
I think this is where I put on my iconoclast hard hat. I think Scrum is incredibly command and control. It's just command and control in small batches. The rigid dividing things up into 2-week iterations is a blunt object, and that the goal of Agile originally was to maintain a certain degree of flexibility. While the Scrum Guide has now taken 2-week iterations out of what you need to do Scrum, it's still definitely there in practice, and it's taught in every Scrum Master class. So if we change the word Scrum to Agile or an Agile mindset, that's something that I have a whole lot of experience in. And what I've found is that the reason that it's hard to introduce something like Kanban or Scrum as a methodology into a project or into project management is because it has no context. And so then you sell it on its merits as a thing and not on how it can actually help people for that particular project. So here's a quick example. We did a very short 1-week project at the World Bank to write a report called the Red Plus report. And that project was only going to last 1 week, and we had to create about a 500-page document in a week with 12 researchers from around the world who had not met each other before. So we got them all together at the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C., and the Agile thing that we did there was pairing. So they sat down, and it was one subject matter expert for each chapter of the document. There were 12 people, 12 chapters. So what we did was we walked around and we closed every other laptop, and we told them that they were going to pair write arbitrarily. So they just, however they were sitting, you two are chapters 1 and 5, you two are chapters 2 and 7, you two are chapters, 6 and whatever. And then what we did was we made, we'll call them micro sprints. So instead of 2 weeks, it was every 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes, I interrupted them and said, how far along are you on your 1 to 10, how far along are you on your outline? 1 to 10, how far are you along on your text? And do you have questions for the other people around the room? And they were unhappy about what I'd asked them to do, but they were really happy that I told them to do it because they were certain that it wasn't going to work and they could blame it on me. So I'd given them an out, so they were willing to move forward. And so what happened was, if you give a scientist or a researcher a keyboard and you say, all right, write, they will write and they will never stop, because their definition of done is saying everything that they know. The moment that I paired them with somebody else, the definition of done was, what's the least amount I need to communicate to this other person so that they know what I do? So instantly we tightened up the scope without actually talking about the scope. The second thing that an expert will do, which you will all recognize because you've all worked with software developers, is they won't talk to each other. They'll take their work and they'll go off and they'll type. And so by telling them, I'm expecting you to have questions for other people, and because they were working with a paired person and they were both thinking about that the whole time, that every 20 minutes they started asking questions of other people. That meant that when they had a question, they wouldn't figure it out for themselves, but they'd immediately get help from somewhere else. And we started to build a collaborative network around the 12 people at the table. By the end of the second day, I didn't have to ask those questions anymore. Okay, so I'd set up that kind of scrummy thing, but I didn't have to ask the questions after the end of the second day because they got used to working that way. They were all working in Google Docs. So by the end of the second day, they all had everyone else's documents open, and they were popping back and forth between documents, and they basically mobbed the end of the document without us telling them to do so. So what we did there was we introduced Agile into a non-Agile environment by figuring out what the constraint was that we needed to remove. And in this case, the constraint was people doing individual work and not having a good definition of done. When you're, and this is true for even for software teams, when you go in and set up that team, find out what the thing is that needs to happen. Find out what the impediments are to making that thing happen, and then build a system that removes those impediments, takes away those barriers, lessens those frustrations to the professionals doing the work. And if you do that, people will do anything you ask them. But if you ask them to do Scrum, they'll say, what's a Scrum? But if, even the Scrum Alliance can't figure out what Scrum is. But if you say to them, hey, we want to get here, and here's a good story about how we can get there, they'll follow you every single time. So my roundabout answer to that is think around treat labels, Kanban, Scrum, PMI, RUP, whatever they might be. Think of those labels as impediments of themselves, right? You want to take their good teachings, but you don't want to take their baggage. And don't be afraid to preach.
Wow. Wow. Jim, can I just quickly give Emmanuel like 2-3 minutes to speak on something that is working on for like 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Mercy. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for everybody for staying this long. Now, I'm just here to speak about Agile. Who is Agile in Nigeria? Being the project we're working on. It's a book project, an ebook project to be precise. This will catalog Agile professionals who are either in Nigeria or of Nigerian origin, just so we can begin to shine some light to Agile professionals within that part of the continent. Now, one of the issues we've had is we can't seem to have any singular document which you can reference to that showcases the fact that there's so many people doing great things within the Agile space. So this book will be a book of personal stories, of journeys for people who have worked in Agile or are still working in Agile. We want to hear your story. We will be sending out details of how to contribute to this book via LinkedIn for starters, and other platforms we might be able to leverage on later on. The aim is to use Agile methodology to develop this book and publish the first one, and subsequently there will be updates that will come after that. Now, one of the things we hope to do is to solicit for information to be passed across the various platforms and various networks, just so people know about what we're doing and they are aware that they can actually contribute to it. So we will be reaching out to professionals, some of whom are already on this particular Agile Coffee meeting at some point. So we trust that you will do your best to oblige us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Emmanuel is the product owner for this project, and the Who is Agile book was written 10 years ago, but as normal, not many Black people or Africans were represented. Now the book is now being locally focused in terms of with Agile Israel, with Agile South Africa, with Agile other countries. So this is the one for Nigeria. So if you know any Agilist that is Nigerian, the link is in the chat. Please, it will take you about 10 to 12 minutes to respond to the question. And the book will be published and you will get a notification once it's published. It's a free project. It's something that we're trying to do to create a repository of Nigerian Agilists for the world to see. Thank you so much, awesome. Jim, and over to you.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Okay, so I think we have this is going to be a mechanical one. Balancing planned versus unplanned work. So I know how I want to answer that, but whoever introduced it, do you want to speak about it a little bit? Because my answer might be in the wrong direction.
Okay, hi. So I put that up. Okay, so I mean, it's typical agile, right? You have teams, you have your backlog groomed, everyone's task ready. I mean, and then they're working, and then everything is on track, and then it happens, some unplanned workshop pops up, and then they tag it urgent. They'll probably even be coming from the CEO, and they say, oh, it's urgent, probably outside what you're currently working on, and then all eyes are on you to set priority. So how do you balance what you planned and then unplanned work?
Yeah. So there's a Mike Tyson quote that says, "Plans are great until you get punched in the face." uh, so you have discovered the primary failing of the batch and queue system. That when we plan for small batches, like a 2-week iteration, which is small but not small enough, we tend to fill that space up with work. And then when unplanned work shows up, we freak out. And then everybody gets stressed. And what usually happens is it just gets added to people's workload. Often it gets added in a way that's not acknowledged or recognized. So people will take on the work. They won't talk about it in the stand-up meetings because it's extra, but now they're being impacted. And there's this fallacy in the horrible metric that we use in Agile, which is velocity. Is a terrible metric. Velocity is as a metric. But what happens is we say, well, that just gets figured out in the velocity. It's like, no, what happens is people work late. Or your velocity is based on a 14-hour workday. So no, that's not what happens. And then also no one ever goes back to test whether or not velocity actually meant something. So in a team where 2-week sprints make sense, I generally tell them to plan for about 50% of what they think they can get done. So there is a rule in psychology that's called that's governed by something called Hofstetter's law. And Hofstetter's law says human beings will underestimate any complex task, even if they are aware of Hofstetter's law. So we naturally underestimate the amount of time it takes to get work done. And that means that if we're just coming up with arbitrary story point numbers and then dividing them by an arbitrary amount of time, we end up with a really weird number that we think has meaning. So in the course of any period of time, you're going to finish a given number of tasks. Some of them are going to be planned. Some of them are going to be unplanned. The unplanned work is generally unplanned. You don't know what it's going to be, but it's also generally about the same amount of unplanned work. Okay, so we don't, yes, crazy things happen from time to time. So what we do is, even if you're doing Scrum, you can do this. You have your board up and stuff is going across the board. Make sure that the board is honest. So everything you're doing goes on the board, even if it's part of the sprint planning or not. So it doesn't matter if it's an unplanned task. All of the planned tasks might be this color and all of the unplanned tasks might be this color. Then you get to the end of the week and then you count them. Not a difficult task, but you count them and you say, what percentage of our work was planned or unplanned? And then you do that a few times and you begin to figure out, okay, not only do we have this percentage of unplanned work, but we know now the composition of that unplanned work. We know that that unplanned work is made up partially of interruptions from marketing, that it's made up partially of having to fix things that broke from things that we released before, that part of it is due to unexpected meetings with other parts of the company, that part of it was due to, weather, but we can see what those are, and then we can start to mitigate those impacts. So we can say, okay, I've got a whole bunch of these pink interruption stickies, and I know that a third of these are all stuff that I'm doing with marketing. And I know that marketing just calls me whenever they feel like it. Maybe we should go have a conversation with marketing and say, hey, you regularly need stuff from us. Can we know earlier that it's coming? Then it becomes planned work. You just took that unplanned work and made it into planned work. And there's tons and tons of stuff that we have right now that are interruptions because we haven't taken the time to actually look at the composition of our work and figure out where we can collaborate better with other groups or people in our group, right? So almost all of that unplanned work, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this, almost all of that work, the pain that it's causing is entirely a self-inflicted wound. And you can get rid of it by just collaborating better with other groups, which might mean you have a meeting with, 2 or 3 groups on Mondays, and you just say, this is what we're planning this week. Can you guys add stuff to it? That's how I balance it.
Okay, just a follow-up. What if it comes from your clients or your stakeholders? Are you going to go to same route?
Yeah. So there's 2 reasons that a stakeholder. Why did I do that? There's 2 reasons that a stakeholder would interrupt you with something else to do. One is that they've come up with a really cool new idea. Which means they might think it is, but it might not really be. But either way, it's something that just emerged out of the ether. But the other and more common reason is because there was too big of a gap in conversations between you and your stakeholder. And that gap gave time for them to either develop another direction, a lack of trust, a need for information, or something like that. So if you have a stakeholder or a boss or part of the company that is super into injecting weird work into your project, then that is a collaborative opportunity with them. Say, your ideas are really great. You've shown up 4 times and done this. It keeps knocking us offline. Can we have these as more constructive conversations? Let me see if I can find something here. I know they're in here somewhere. Sorry, I wasn't planning on talking about this one, but I think it's over here. No, it's not. Dang it. It should have been a one-click thing. I'm failing in my organization here. There we go. So this is a visualization that we will use in our Kanbans. So we want to look at the collaborative weight of work. And so we have a bunch of silos. Let's say that this is work that we're doing. And right now, this would be all work that we are doing. Sorry, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. And then we'll find that like some of the work that we're doing right now, we need to collaborate with silo C, some of it we need to collaborate with all the silos, some of it we need to collaborate with, but we start to build out what the collaborative nature is of our work. So another thing that interrupts us all the time is what in Agile they call dependencies. And what dependencies are is your silos don't match your work. So we treat dependencies like, oh, I have to go to this other team. But what it really is that this task requires expertise between both of these silos. And the task doesn't care. This task completely does not care what your silos are. It just needs to be done. So what will happen is task B is assigned to silo A. And then silo B doesn't know they're working on it until one day silo A says, hey, I need this in order to finish my work. Can you get it to me right away? But what we don't say is, hey, you know what? As this is coming up, we'd better talk to silo B and talk about that stuff. Or what might end up happening is that work looks like this, where everyone has tasks that rely on silo C. So silo A has worked with silo C, silo B has worked with silo C, silo D has worked with silo C. And what we know now is that silo C is a bottleneck, right? So now what that doesn't mean is everybody can get mad at silo C or we should give them a bunch of new hires. What this means now is silo A, silo B, and silo D now work for silo C. They become the boss. So they're now the bottleneck. And what the other silos have to do is say, okay, so this one, say, you know what, we need silo C for it. We need silo C for this one, and we need silo C for this one. But if we did all of our work and then just brought them in to do like a 1 hour working session, we could knock all these out. Right? Some of these others might be like silo C has to do almost all the work. So silo D would then be asking, how can we support you to get this done faster? Do you want us to give you some people, or, what do you want? But we start to have those conversations as collaborations, because this stuff, I guarantee you, is a huge, huge amount of the interruptions that most of us here face on a daily basis. So seeing this, so this column, this would be, this is how we are actually visualizing our backlog. We're starting to see our backlog in context. And we can do that by urgency and importance. We can do that by I've got like 30 or 40 different visualizations up here. There's another one just really quickly that I'll show just because I'm in the tool. This is one of the ones that's been the favorite lately. Is that what tends to happen when we work with groups and talk to them about their technical debt is we'll say, what do you need to work on? And they will say, like, this thing is the most important thing. So just a quick funny thing about the word important, it has no meaning. Their importance literally has no meaning. It's whatever you feel at that time is what's important. So what we do with this thing is we've got all this technical debt here, and we tell people, is this going to kill the company if it blows up, or is it going to have no impact on the company if it blows up? And people will start putting things in along this line, right? So now they start to see that those technical debt, they see that in context, right? That's nice. What's really interesting is, like, let's say this one's really super painful. Like, if this thing blows up, everything in the company will instantly die. We'll have to close our doors. Everyone will go home. When we ask people what the most important thing was, it's always like this or this. It's always something in the middle. Because internally, we're doing the math. What can we fix? What am I not afraid of? So things out here, this word is doom. Things out here are scary. So when you're asking people to prioritize things or stack rank things, they'll always stack rank these things the highest. Okay. Then we say, okay, now we're starting to see that stuff in context. Now here's a second context. Now we say, all right, so is this going to take forever or is this going to be done today? And people will start to move these things to whether or not they think it will take a long time or not a long time. But the weird thing about this is, and I've done this like 100 times, is that when they do that, you see how I'm not just moving them up and down? You see how they're moving right and left too? When they get that second context, they have something else to judge doom or not doom by. So when we make a decision on one thing like importance, we will almost always make the wrong decision because there isn't enough information to make a good decision on. But when we add even one more context, now all of a sudden we can make an educated guess. All right, this might kill the company, but it's going to take forever to do. So we need to do some planning and get some funding for that. Right now, we have a team that is really terrible at fixing technical debt. So let's pick this one. This is painful enough so that we'll see the benefit from it, but it will take a limited amount of time and we'll get this done and we'll say, all right, that's cool, we finished it. And then what next one we pick might be this one. And we might finish that. So why wouldn't we go up towards the doom is because this is one of the key things. This is like why I went this way, is that when you're teaching people Agile, you're building mental muscles that they don't have right now. And the biggest muscle is how to actually build good stuff, how to actually make a culture of continuous improvement. So when we're doing these are those first exercises before we run the marathon. But we now know we're doing these exercises to get to the marathon. We have a narrative that says, I'm going to do these short runs. I'm going to do these little 2Ks or 5K runs so that I can work myself up to this. As might be apparent by my being all excited about this stuff really excites me. This is the crux of Agile for me, is that if you can get into any situation and you can say to people, you have planned work, you have unplanned work, you have technical debt, you have stuff you're expecting to do, you have things you like, you have things you don't like. We need to see that. We need to see it in context so that we can plan the right work at the right time and you can go home as a satisfied professional. And once any team nails that, they can take on anything. So the Coney Island Hospital, when COVID hit, all of the other projects freaked out because they all had to go home and it's construction. The Coney Island people called everybody together on Zoom and said, how are we going to deal with this? And then when they were done, they wrote a document that they sent to the rest of Turner. This one little project in Brooklyn sent this document out to the thousands of people that work at Turner saying, here's how you can deal with COVID. Because we built that expectation.
Thank you so much, Jamie.